fun and games, right? We do purposeful work. And of course, oops, I'm a little ahead of myself on the Benedictine, but I'm going to scroll ahead and you'll have this in your chat log. I went over. But in a pandemic, paperwork moves slowly, so they didn't give me approval to teach this course until a few days before the term started, right? And that's really scary. So I started thinking about it. I thought, well, Andy and I have taught classes where we used this design thinking approach from Tim Brown, who wrote an article in 2008 in the Harvard Review. And of course, we documented it in a book chapter we did for IGI Global on cognitive remapping, which essentially is talking about how do we help students get over their fear of team projects and how do we get them to want to do this kind of work. Well, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Andy Stricker, Spinoza Quinnell, because he created a grid for me. I have my own Lobo grid now. Isn't that amazing? I don't know about you, but I love having my own world, and it was so smooth. The first day in class, you see those students there? This is at the end of a 3-hour class. We had 2 short breaks, but otherwise we had a wild ride that first class because we were mastering the Firestorm viewer, setting up the advanced menu, right? And let me explain. The students were undergraduates and graduates, all in the same class. They were game design students, computer science students, and I said, hey, 2020 is not challenging enough. Let's open it up to every discipline and every student from any background. Because I said, I just don't have enough of a challenge, right? So we're hosting this out of a farmhouse in Alabama, with such amazing friends who support us, and we're a community, right? The Harmony Society. And of course, the Harmony Society is now comprised of about 14 grids, maybe more, because every few weeks, Andy has created another grid, and it's just something to brighten our world and also give us a proof of concept for our research. But enough of that. Let's get on to the educational. So you see the students on screen now, ahead of you. But I'm going to show you some of the projects they produced. I'm going to take you behind the scenes on these course objectives. Let's give that slide a moment to render. And then again, if you're just joining me today, please realize all these slides are available online. You just have to log into LinkedIn to be able to see them, I think, because LinkedIn now has that resource at slideshare.net. But and I already showed the first day in world. That's the problem with being a time traveler. You sometimes are ahead of yourself, right? But anyway, so you see the 2 course numbers in the chat log. So undergraduate and graduate students. And then, of course, I have individual projects, I have group projects, and then every class I'm doing 2 assessments. But instead of having quizzes and tests and stuff like that, no anxiety in 2020, right? I embedded them in the natural, organic things we do in the classroom. So I would have them building and tinkering and doing stuff. I'd have them set their default permissions so everything was turned on. That means modify, copy, transfer. Because otherwise, when they turn in their homework, it's not very interesting if I can't read it, right? So of course I had them do this. Now, for the university's sake, because they had never seen such a thing, I had to record everything in Zoom. So I'm running a Zoom session while we're in the virtual world. And then, of course, we're doing all this activity. But when I got done, they wanted me to break all the videos into little 100 megabyte videos so they would fit on their Moodle site. So now I have this little technology moment too, right? And I'm like, yeah, my poor video card. Well, you know what I did, Electra? I finally had to break down and buy a new system. Because some of you know that I built a system in 2008 with 2 graphics cards and some nice tweaks. But unfortunately, that was 2008, right? So I needed an update in the worst way. So I splurged and got the Alienware Aurora R11 with the 3080 graphics card, the RTX 3080. and 128 gigabytes of RAM, okay? That's just the RAM. Now, I didn't get it till the end of October, so that means I schlepped along for about 7 weeks suffering on my old Windows 7 system until I got this. Right? But I love this system. Well, anyway, so I'm creating all these videos, and I have to break them apart, and so I'm using Camtasia or other tools to get them to the right size and get them back up. That was a lot of little production moments. Now, if you think this was easy, it wasn't exactly easy. It was once I got the hang of it, but it took a little practice. And I must explain, I was teaching 13 different classes in fall term for 4 universities. So I was a little bit of a madwoman. And this class was my sanity check, right? Because any of you who grade, know that grading's not the fun part of our work, unless you really like grading, I love offering feedback, but I really dislike the grading portion. So I said, how can I make grading more fun for me, right? So of course I have all these fun little things we're doing that stimulate the grading process, and one of them was to create a community garden. I was enchanted by the fact that the university has a little farm that's affiliated with it that would bring produce to campus several times a week, and people would pick up their $4 box of produce, right? And I thought, what a magical thing, right? And of course, every day they put out the good word for each other. They're constantly socializing in the chat. They do a lot of round robin, a lot of little work. And so, these trade-offs, it was tempered by all this technology I'm using and all the ways I'm thinking about the course. So it was lovely. And so I had the students create this garden, and then we danced in the garden. I designed, choreographed a dance ball with some of the Evil Fool dances. These aren't the normal ones that are in Second Life, in OpenSim. These are the scripts that were open source by this individual. You have to give credit to, right? And then I choreographed them in such a way that whenever I twirl, right, my skirt stands up, and I feel like a little girl, wanting to be a ballerina again, And so, so I brought a copy over to Virtual Harmony too, for us all to enjoy in the ballroom, right? And so you notice my students, you see their avatars? They started creating their own avatars, their own looks. They went from the early starter looks to the very personalized identity. And of course, I said, well, why don't you write and talk about this? What you were thinking and what you did and what kinds of skills you learned and how this will feed your future work. So I used an approach called cognitive apprenticeship. Does anyone know what that means? Anyone? If you think about apprenticeship, you know that usually involves someone working closely with the learners, right? And demonstrating. And cognitive means I'm really interested in how they think and reason and how they take away these learning activities and make them their own. So some of my students wound up teaching in this world. Instead of just being a student and being a learner, doing what I asked them to do, they started taking charge, which I dearly love, right? So, oh, and by the way, Marley, if you can't see this content, here's a link to the online version, and you're welcome to download that if you wish, or to look at it online. It may ask you to log into LinkedIn, and now it's being run by Scribd, but I kept it open source and free. Okay? I do have a Creative Commons license on my content. Now you'll notice they're learning all these things. We're thinking about presence. We're thinking about interaction. So these are all behaviors that lay over the projects and the content and all the skills they're learning. Checking my time. So far, so good. So, so anyway, we call them the Saints because they're from St. Martin's University, and that's what they call themselves. And I said, what a refreshing way to address a class. Come on, Saints, let's go. And of course, so I choreographed the dance ball, and And I was very fascinated with identity creation, with how we express ourselves and how we share ideas. And some of the students had to, at least a couple of them had to evacuate because fires were going off at that time. Do you guys remember all the fires around the country? Well, they were in Washington State. I was in Colorado, and it was so cloudy outside. I had to leave my windows closed, and I had to use an air filter just to be able to breathe. So thick, and it was thick for almost a month. It wasn't a trivial thing at all. But yes, they created fantasy characters for their identity. They were superheroes, right? And I didn't use the words, India. I let them decide what they were. And of course, you'll see that slide up there right now. We were hypergridding. How many of you know what the hypergrid is? Dr. Krista Lopez. Hey, there you go. That's because Agile Bill's in the know, right? Dr. Krista Lopez designed for Open Simulator the ability to leave your world where you have an account and to go visit any world that has the hypergrid enabled, which means with a URL and a port number. The port number gives you access so you can teleport in. Now, you don't have the contents in your inventory, as Mal Burns would tell you. You only have what's in your suitcase. So you have to pack your suitcase before you go, and those items are accessible to you while you're traveling. You can also buy or share or pick up free content while you're traveling. Bring it home to your home world. So the students were learning they could expand their world. That's right, John Paradigm. They could go get other content. They didn't have to make everything. At first we were making everything because, let's face it, we were learning. Now, at first, I had them use the hypergrid for our grids, and these are all separate individual grids with different port numbers. And so the students had to learn to navigate, go to these places, and then, of course, interact with content there. When you first create an account in Firestorm, you don't have your suitcase automatically. You normally make one trip, pick up an item or two, come back home to your home grid, and the next time you log in, your suitcase will be there for you, in case you're wondering. There's another way to activate it, but that's the easy way, right? So the smoke was so thick, we were very fearful. We were already fearful about disease, and about death and all the things that we feared in 2020, and now we had fire. So the home that you have, the safe harbor you have, could be threatened, right? And so that was a very strange set of circumstances to teach under. Now, I'm in Colorado, right? And we had 2 record-breaking fires that had exceeded anything I'd seen before. So the students, it was like a form of relaxation to come to class. And do you know, everyone came to class. From the folks who went from start to finish, they all came to class and they were so eager. It was real delight, thrilled to be there. Now, our class activities, I give you a list of them, and they're here on the slide. It'll focus here in a moment, but I also put them in the chat for you. And the reason I put them in here for you is when you're designing your classes and thinking about what you're teaching, you may be doing a subset of these technologies, because I knew some of my students wanted to create 3D games. Others would like to create virtual reality games. And let's face it, most of them were not 3D mesh designers, so I couldn't just pull them into Blender or Maya and start creating content. We had to first think about content and its behavior. What is vector geometry? What is all this prim design? And how do you script? What does animation mean? And the hologram Reser, think of that like a holodeck. That's what Andy Stricker calls it. And I love that phrase because, of course, first off, it doesn't violate the intellectual property rights of Paramount Pictures for Star Trek, right? But it also reminds us that this is something we create, we host on a Reser. We click this device and we make content appear and disappear upon demand. And so I taught the students how to put their content on this device. Now, I didn't expect them in this first class to do it because, let's face it, I covered like 15 subjects, right? And rather thoroughly. I also took them through Dr. Barbara Truman's research, and I give you some links for it and some slides so you could see how this theory comes to light. Now, Artur Scharmer's research is from the MIT Presencing Institute, and it's the reason you're here today. Why does your presence matter? Why do we share in these worlds? What is the benefit we get from it? And where are we going with this technology? We're not just doing arts and crafts. This is serious, purposeful work, and we want our students to have this amazing, satisfying experience and, of course, share it with others. So it's not something we just want to hoard. This is an experience that we're trying to spread. We're trying to pioneer and nurture it. Well, these projects you're seeing on screen are by the students. They gave a walkthrough, and I was video recording it. I was taking some screenshots. Maybe not the best quality screenshots because I was multitasking like you'd not believe, right? I have 13 people going in every direction. And of course, I'm using my camera to latch onto them to see some of this. Now, one of the students, let me get to that slide. It's a little bit further on, so let me go a couple slides ahead. One of the students decided to teach data structures because that's what he does. The graduate student, the TA for a data structures class, which means how we store data in a programming language, right? And so let's let that res. This next slide, as it's resing for you, the student, while I put out skins of every ethnicity and for persons of color, she missed the ones that had a darker skin. So she went out on the hypergrid and found the skin that she's wearing here, and she says, "This makes me feel like I'm home. Makes me feel so comfortable." And I had no way of knowing, you know, what ethnicity they're from, because to me, they're all students, right? In a virtual world, we're all equal. And so, of course, I was thrilled to see that she had found this tool for herself. That's really what we want from our learners. We don't want them to be dependent on us. Well, I'm going to pause here on the text chat because I'm starting to talk about the next project, and I have to get there on the slides. Let's just move ahead. And now with some of these slides, I positioned the camera isometrically, which means in the air, looking down at an angle from behind, right? But I also, a couple of times, I realized they were creating mazes with some of the walls and the structures, so I started taking photos from above as well. And so you'll see those in just a moment. Are there any questions for me? I love interactive sessions, so you don't have to be. I'm studying the text chat, so anytime you want to ask a question, let's go ahead and put it in. I'm completely comfortable. Server access, so you can create your own sims in OpenSim. Well, John Paradigm, what we're talking about there is the fact that you can download, and I had the students do this too. I'm so glad you asked that question. I thought, well, you know, it's not enough to just get in a virtual world and create content and do all this work. Why don't we have them download their own server and run it on their own hard drive? And then they could use it as a sandbox when they're not in class or traveling around the world or whatever, right? They could put it on a USB. They could design their own projects in the safe, quiet confines of their home. And that way, if they lost internet access or had to evacuate, they wouldn't be dependent on their internet connection. So I was really worried about students who might, you know, lose connection and feel disconnected from their comfort zone. It's not so much the homework. It's the fact that this class was healing for all of us, right? What you see on screen there on the current slide is one of the students teaching data structures, and all the other students are participating, going, "Hey, what's this mean?" And I thought that was just such a fun use of one of our projects. He was able to make it his own and then use it with his students. So I thought that is wonderful. Near the end of the course, I do give you a sense of not just the course objectives and the course activities, but how do we stage those week by week? Because let's face it, as educators, we have to stay straight on time, right? We have to map with the university's requirements. And universities fear virtual worlds a little bit. Some of them are very enlightened, but others are not. Here's why. They're always worried we're going to have a FERPA conversation in a public place, right? And we know that the Family Rights Act, Rights to Privacy Act, is non-directory information for students. They want to make sure that we keep those grades in a safe environment in the course tool. So we are using Moodle at the same time, but we're not talking about grades there either. Sure, we give grade feedback directly to a learner, but we're not to the class at large, right? So here I have a few images where I'm looking down on the contents. And I was just fascinated with because they built all this stuff, right? So I was like, and of course I gave them probably thousands of textures, in case you're wondering. I went and scarfed up the OARs, and if you're new to OpenSim, that means an OpenSim archive, or a copy of a region with all its contents. And that included things like the textures, a lot of costuming. So when we got close to Halloween, we had all these costumes. Of course, they decided to mix and match to personalize their avatars, or to create their own avatars and non-player characters. If you're playing the game here at Virtual Worlds Best Practices in Education, that's the game with the yellow exclamation mark above the head. That's using a style similar to what World of Warcraft uses, but also in other games, so you know that's an active quest. And the students were creating all kinds of quests in their work as well. Teaching in a virtual world, is as natural as breathing for me. So I only had 2 or 3 days to design this course and to come up with all these objectives that you see here. And of course, I was thinking back to a Global Learning Forum event that Andy held. This might have been around 2010. Vanderbilt University came and spoke, and they had a grant. They had analyzed what would it take to teach nurse practitioners and nurses here in this world. They had a problem. They noticed that their average age of their faculty with doctoral degrees in nursing was 55, and that their faculty was getting older, and they weren't getting new faculty. So they were turning away 45,000 applicants who were qualified every year. This is a terrible thing, because these are students who feel like their needs are rushed, right? They want this education, but of course they can't have it. So they thought, well, wonder if we could somehow offer more classes, better instruction, and do these simulations here in the world. What kinds of skills would we have to master to be able to do this? And I remember listening to them thinking, they said something like over 130, maybe 135 different skills. Now they're thinking very discreetly. That would be like your camera controls. How are you seeing these slides? Are you using your Alt key if you're on Windows and left-clicking on the viewer to scroll in? Are you holding down the Control and the Alt key and your fingers look like a V and you're scrolling on in? Or are you clicking on the Control 1 to do the look at symbol? There's all these different ways. I think it's Control 1. I'm getting old, right? I have to take a look. Yep, it's Control 1. It's that first button when you're in the edit, right? And so there's all these different ways to interact and look at content, and they needed the nurses to be able to do this. Wouldn't want nurses studying for clinicals and procedurals and not being able to interact with content and to see it quite clearly. Well, here's the Simpsons House that I talked about a few minutes ago. So one project said they wanted comic relief. They wanted the light side of the world. So they created this house and all these experiences, a little bit like the opening cartoon. When the car comes spinning up and the family lands on the sofa and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's us there in the room. And then, of course, on TV, they put Ren and Stimpy. So they put cartoons in and all these different elements. It was rather fun. I'm not normally a pink person, but I liked it. It was a great treat. Here's a little more of it. Oop, and I'm about to close, I see. Are there any questions for me? I see John Paradigm says Moodle will stream in world from a web page and that avatars can use. That's true. One challenge with Moodle, for those of you who've not designed a course in it, is the version we were using. It used all these wonderful, expansive terms to describe how you could use badges, how you could give different kinds of feedback and credentials and set up groups and stuff. But the difficulty was in the grading process. There were several different ways to do it. And I wound up using the spreadsheet version to make it a little more reliable for my purpose. See, one of our goals as educators is to demystify complexity and make it very easy for us to focus on what's essential, the important parts of the classroom experience, which is working with the learners. Making sure that they not only understand, but that it becomes their world and their learning experience, and they teach it to others. If you've used the learning pyramid before, and I know that these things come under great criticism, but I love that because the bottom layer of the learning pyramid is that 90% mark of learning, where you have your learners teach it to others, to each other, and to reinforce what they know, and to develop it and fine-tune it. So some of my students were creating things that were really far beyond what I expected in the class, and I was very gratified by this. Let's see, Marley says, unless you have advanced technology, I wonder if you could still do all of this. Well, I did it with a Windows 7 system with only 8 megabytes of RAM, Marley, and I have to admit, my video quality may not be as elegant as it is now, but and of course, I had to keep blowing on my system because I was so afraid it was going to overheat, because I had the virtual world going, I had the video going, and I had both Zoom and Camtasia going, right? Those are resource hogs right there. And then, of course, I'm listening to students on Zoom, I'm listening to, and then they're all splitting up. I put them on aerial platforms so they could have their own space. And I staggered them. I made the bottom see-through so I could keep an eye on everyone at the same moment. And then it was opaque from the top so they wouldn't have that eerie feeling they were going to fall through. I had them create signs with cooltext.com. If you haven't used that, that's so much fun. So I had them decide what's their name and what it would look like in the virtual world using one of the glamorous fonts there. And of course, some of them are elegant and some of them are Klingon, right? So you have the wide range of capabilities and looks, which really makes it a marvelous experience. And so the students created their own little spaces. Then I had everyone create plants and trees, right, from scratch that they would contribute to the community garden, mirroring what they did on campus, but they could no longer go to campus, right? Campus was closed, and everyone had this hurt and bruised, their hearts were bruised, right? They didn't know, they felt powerless. What can we do? In the virtual world, you're not powerless. That's one of the advantages. And in having this marvelous Lobo grid to do work, we were in a safe environment. We didn't have to worry about people tripping over other people. Dr. Striger was so wonderful. One day, I'm teaching, and all of a sudden the system flickered for a moment. And I was thinking, oh, it's my system, right? My old one. No, it was Linux. Linux decided to do an update, and he had us on a Mac server. The Mac server has, Andy, is it 32 gigabytes of RAM or what? And I did mean gigabytes earlier if I said megabytes. In any event, so it's a Mac server, but it's running Linux, right? And so we're using all these resources in a very integrated fashion. We're using a lot of open source. We're using the María database from, so we're not just using MySQL anymore. We're thinking through, our resources, and we use this as a proof of concept, by the way, for many of our research projects. We get together on Sundays and research, and tomorrow we're going to talk about artificial intelligence education and how we're using machine learning and AI in our virtual worlds as a proof of concept, and then how we also share that, how Andy shares it. I always say we, but it's Andy's the mastermind, right? And he and I, for those of you who don't know, went to high school and college together. And we lost track of each other for 29 years until he saw my article in the EDUCAUSE Review in 2008, invited me to be part of the team. Now on Friday, we have two sessions. The morning session I have with Val Librarian and with Zinnia, with Rhiannon Chat Noir, with Buffy. Hey, Buffy. And we'll be leading a roundtable discussion that gives you a voice to talk about the experiences you've had over the last year and where we're going. Social good. Let's face it, education is social good, right? And we want to put the good back in. Keep that reinforced. In the media, we keep hearing a lot about the negative. I don't want to give the negative power anymore. I really want to take it back. So we have these two talks tomorrow, Andy's and mine, and then, of course, the Nonprofit Commons early in the morning. That'll be at 9 a.m. Then on Saturday, Andy and our Virtual Harmony group is going to talk about those 14 grids we just showcased and what we did to strengthen ourselves and to give ourselves a strong foundation for today and the future so that we could let go of all this baggage and heal. And I don't mean heal in the sense of a virus, but I mean our spirits, our psyches, so that we're centered and ready to work. Ready to work. Anyway, we're part of the Virtual Harmony Society. We want to thank you for coming today. By the way, if you have not seen any of Tiffany Schlane's videos, you'll want to. She leads the Character Day each year, which focuses on your character strength, on the things that make you strong, and of course help you to work well with others. Last year, every few weeks, she would hold a baking class in Zoom on Fridays, right after the Nonprofit Commons. And she had Angela Duckworth come bake with us. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's famous for her research on grit. And of course, that's when I think of the pandemic, I think about grit, right? And the things we do here in the metaverse. So please persevere. You are pioneers in the area, and we need you. I want to thank the VWBPE 2021 Organizing Committee, all of the wonderful volunteers. You make us shiny. Now, what TV show does the word shiny come from? It fits the setting that we're in. We're floating in space. Hey, Gan's got it. Firefly. That's right. So stay shiny. And John Paradigm has a last comment. With a website bringing web pages in World or opening in World interactive web pages, that's possible. You can do it with a word find or crossword for avatars in World. It's a powerful tool when it's set up correctly for education. And if you want more information, contact John. Thank you, stranger. Thank you, Gan. So let's rock this conference. Reconnaissance 2021. Any questions? If you joined us in progress, here's the link once again to the slides. And if you need a little slide viewer, just whisper me and I'll send you one over. Take care. Yes, this was number 317, John. I count because I'm painfully shy. Thank you, everyone. Absolutely.